was ready to. She was just sitting there and happy that we stopped.
Yeah.
And Jimmy is organizing who's who is going to visit whom. So not everybody's been called on to visit yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm still kind of hanging on to the UMW, take the bag and knock on the door and leave it.
Okay.
When somebody's sick, I often take soup and salad and stop at the door and sometimes just leave it if they're not home. I went to see Laura and I was probably there 20 or 30 minutes, which seemed like a long visit to me. But these are all unorganized, especially the dropping off bags, and it's not really that's not very.
And anybody
We aren't doing that exactly.
Anybody can grab those bags and do that. We still have all the sweet little old ladies that are still taking care of people too. So they're going to continue to do that.
So several of the things you've mentioned are related to boundaries. So time's definitely a boundary, like, you know, how much time you're willing to spend, how much energy they have for you to be there. Time is a boundary. What you take to somebody's house is a boundary. If you leave it at the door, that's a boundary. So, you know, there's lots of things to think about, you know, in terms of what you're comfortable with and what whoever you're visiting is comfortable with in terms of boundaries.
So it can be different for different situations.
It could be. One thing I'm going to challenge you with today is to think about your own boundaries and what, you know, if you're okay with 3 hours or if you have it, or if it's going to have an impact on you to stay longer and mess up your day and relationships to stay longer, then, you know, is it better to kind of stay within a certain boundary, except for like an exception, you know, where you might make a judgment call to stay longer.
We visited 3 people that day.
I bet you were tired. I bet you were tired.
It could be draining.
Yeah.
I even thought about setting myself a timer.
You could do that. I mean,
like, you know.
I mean, therapists, we use a 50-minute, hour, 60-minute, and you know, there's clocks all over because time's a boundary.
I've decided I want to buy a watch. Because I haven't used a watch for years because I had my cell phone. But because a lot of times it's dark, you don't know where their clock is, you don't know what time it is.
Yeah.
So it's acceptable to set a timer for yourself and just say, okay, you know, I'm going to limit myself to 30 minutes or whatever. You just, you know, let it vibrate in your pocket.
Let it vibrate in your
okay,
pocket so it's not. Sure, absolutely. Because you can choose, you can decide that. It doesn't have to be open-ended. And you know, go ahead.
When somebody's ill, do you have different boundaries?
Yeah, so let's talk, we're going to get to that in a second. So you carry a big boundary around with you all the time. So let's all look at our hands. What do you notice about your hands?
They're old. I noticed that right off. I thought you were really old.
What's one of the first things you see when you look at your hands?
The imperfections.
Well, you see your skin, right?
Yeah,
and your skin is your physical boundary of your body. So, I mean, it's very normal and natural to have boundaries. Like we carry a boundary around with us all the time. And our skin is made up of cells. And even a cell has boundaries, right? If you remember back to your biology, like a cell lets some things in and keeps some things out, right? And so boundaries are very natural and healthy. And healthy relationships have boundaries because I end where you start, right? And so we are not enmeshed. We are not the same person. We are two separate people. And within our bodies, like our organs have boundaries, right? Things don't bleed into each other. We're grateful. Our liver has its own boundaries and our heart has its own boundaries and our brain, you know. So it's really important to think about. It's a natural thing to have boundaries, and you're not a bad person to leave when your timer goes off or whatever. That it's going to help you have better energy to take to the next people, you know, that you see. So why are boundaries important? They keep us and other people safe, both physically and emotionally. And probably you have your own personal boundaries that you never share out loud with others, but they're just yours. You may have boundaries that you speak out loud to others, and then other people may have boundaries that they ask you to respect. So an example of a personal boundary might be, you know, I'd never pick up a hitchhiker, Okay, that might be a personal boundary I have. Or I'll never go out to lunch alone with a coworker I manage. Okay, that might be I'm going to respect that hierarchy boundary. Or I see this at the YMCA all the time. I'm not going to change clothes in the gym locker room. Like I'm going to use, a stall to be private rather than, and some of us have boundaries where we'll just change in front of everybody. We're getting out of our swimming suits, whatever. So, but you want to think about what you're comfortable with in terms of your boundaries. So, a boundary I might state to other people is if you're drinking alcohol, I'm not going to get in a car with you. Okay, so that would be an example of a boundary I'd say. And if you went into somebody's home, you could say, I'm going to be here for 30 minutes. And so you set the boundary out loud, and then everybody understands there's a boundary. So that's something you can do when you go in. A boundary that others may set, then request that I honor is I don't do hugs, or please don't touch me. So you want to think about that, and we're going to talk about touch a little bit. But when I just went to the American Psychological Association meeting, they even had like badges that people wore about how comfortable they were with touch. So I went out to dinner with one of my former students, and she was fine with me hugging her, but she didn't want people she didn't know to hug her. So, and probably during COVID, the peak, we saw, there were wristbands and things like, red for stop and green for go if you were at a wedding and people, wanted to hug you. So, so being aware of kind of what other people's boundaries are and respecting them, even if they're different than our boundaries, is really important. So let's talk about what kind of boundaries might be challenged during congregational care visits. So what are your thoughts on that?
People might want to talk about private things, whether it's about themselves or about somebody else, gossip and things like that. That very well could happen in the natural stream of conversation. So to me, that's something I go and just try to shy away from or change the subject really fast. I feel like I don't really know how to say that's a boundary that we shouldn't be crossing at this point. So to me, that's one that can occur.
And I've already noticed in this room, y'all are very good with confidentiality, and so, that's an example where somebody shares, I don't have to share with anybody else, or I can realize, okay, we're going to keep this in the context of this visit.
Right.
So.
And I was thinking about them disclosing their own physical situation, or
mental,
family, familial, whatever.
Yeah. So privacy, confidentiality, those are boundaries.
Well, and not asking them. I'm the person, if you tell me something, I'll listen and I want to know. But if you don't tell me, I'm not going to ask you.
So not being intrusive.
I just totally am not intrusive.
And I always feel like that's something I have to state out loud while I'm there. And by the way that our group is set up, you need to know that anything you tell us is completely confidential. We do not, and I won't even discuss it with the other team members if you don't want to. So it's like I kind of let them think about what they're down,
Well, that's a good idea.
I just go ahead and say it out loud. I make a point. I don't always remember at the beginning, but at least remember at the end to say, okay, this is completely.
I didn't think about telling them that we wouldn't share it among us.
Correct, because it might be that
permission if we can't, if they'd like us to.
Right, so that we can pray for them, but if they're like, I'm just not to the point where I want anyone to know, then you just tell them, then no one will know.
Yeah.
But me, or if we have someone else come visit you, we might think about sharing that information. So anyway,
Yeah, and those of you who are in healthcare, and mental health care, that's called informed consent. So you just kind of tell folks up front, what the boundaries are for confidentiality, and so.
I think too, asking them what their boundaries are. What are you comfortable with me sharing? Are you comfortable with me sharing it with Pastor Kim, or prefer?
right.
This is just between you and I.
Becky and I go out and we meet the public. I mean, I talk to everybody and anybody I can talk to. She'll tell you, I'll walk away from her and go talk to people. And what I've been finding out is all you have to do is ask somebody, how are you? And the next thing you know, you're standing there for 35, 40 minutes listening to a life story. They just want to get it out. They want to give you what you're asking, you know. And it's just a simple question. But the next thing you know, I have met so many people and know their life stories, I can't remember them all. But people right now, what we're finding is if you say something to them, they're going to hold you there. They're going to talk to you, you know.
They're so happy to have somebody to talk to.
Right. And 3 to 1, I have people look at me and go, you know, would you help me? You know, that kind of thing. And I know there are some people that just have a thing about your boundaries and all that kind of stuff, and that's a good thing. I'm not saying it's not, but I think we're putting too many emphasis on boundaries. You know, 'cause there's people out there that need us. There's people out there that want us to talk to them, be with them, share. And I've been going to nursing homes a lot, and those people in there, they are so starving
For affection.
for affection, for just a
Yes.
kind word.
So it is
That-
very critical for us to how we can set the boundary. It is not blocking them to approach, but how can we healthily, you know, have a relationship properly,
But
not crossing.
what I'm getting at is if you open to them, they're going to open to you like you wasn't expecting.
That's right. That's right.
You know, you're not expecting what they're going to give you.
Well, and I think kind of the angle I'm coming at is so then the onus, the responsibilities on us to make sure that they're healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
And so, you know, some of the things I thought about that could be challenged are, you know, when you're paying a visit, you might be asked to help someone use the restroom. You might be asked to help somebody get up from a chair. You know, you might see someone in a hospital in a state of undress or people really distressed. You might be asked to be in a photo. You might be asked for information. You might see or hear things that maybe you wish you hadn't. And so, so I think that's something to keep in mind is, you know, to be aware of, you know, it's okay for you, you know, you don't have to help a 300-pound person use the restroom and where you could be hurt. You don't have to.
Or they could get hurt.
They could get hurt.
Right.
Yeah. So you want to think about what, you know, safety, and also, you know, I pay, you know, malpractice insurance because I'm in a room with people with the door shut and they're vulnerable people, and you're working with vulnerable people too. So you want to think about what's safe for everybody in terms of, you know, in terms of boundaries. So, so let's talk, you know, you talked about touch. So I've got a handout on touch. So that's a really good segue into that. So this handout came from, you know, now the Methodist Church has safe gatherings,
gatherings.
right? Yeah.
Right.
So way back when it first started, I was a trainer for groups, so this is a handout. It's an oldie, but it's a goodie because it's really good about having us think about why intentions are not the key to good touch, bad touch, and confusing touch. So my intention to hug somebody or pat them or, you know, hold their hand might be really good because I want to extend comfort. But it's really important to ask someone, are you comfortable with me holding your hand? Or are you comfortable with a hug? Or to ask them before you do it. Because all of these things are what a hug might go through in terms of how it's perceived by the person who's the recipient of it. So does the person who you're hugging or touching have a freedom of choice about the touching? You know, can they say no? You know, or they somebody who, you know, is laid up with a broken leg in a hospital and they can't move, you know, they can't escape or move. So think about the person's freedom of touch. Receiver's perception of the toucher. So do they see you as a friend or foe? And think about this. This changes, okay? Sometimes with our loved ones, we're in a mood where we want a hug from them. And sometimes if we're irritated with them, the last thing we want is a hug. So this changes from time to time in terms of how they are. You know, people say don't touch, if they're in a lot of pain, they'll say don't touch me.
Yeah.
So the receivers and touchers relationship, you know, what's the status of our relationship right now? Is it where we're in a good space and touch is welcome? You know, if I'm going to the nursing home and the person's looks forward to my visit and, you know, then that's going to be a positive, you know, vibe. Receivers' expectation for touch. Are they going to be surprised by the touch, or are they going to be startled, or are they, you know, expecting it? If I say, would it be okay if I, you know, give you a hug, then they have a chance to.
Hands while we pray, that kind of
right.
thing. You know? Sometimes
Yeah.
we just might not want to.
Right. Receiver's history of abuse. So you might not know that the person has had a history of abuse. And I can think of, I took a yoga class many years ago, and the teacher ended the course with, we were all in a circle and you gave everybody in front of you a back rub. So I thought, man, if you had a history of abuse, would you really want that from a stranger? Yeah, and there wasn't a conversation about, you know, is this okay or not? So
then you felt peer pressure to do it,
yeah,
and receive it,
yeah,
and that can make you feel very uncomfortable.
yeah, and I don't have a right to know about somebody's history of you know, that's their private information. Receivers' experience with touch. Has touch been a positive thing for them, or has touch not? You know, some people will say, you know, I've got a bubble around me and this is why, or I need, you know, my space, and because touch might not always have been a welcome thing. Receiver's current emotional state. Okay, so if you see the Chiefs win the Super Bowl and people are hugging and high-fiving and patting people on the rear end, and, you know, their current emotion, you know, they're in a ecstatic emotional state. But I tell you, probably if I went to Chiefs training camp and walked up and patted somebody in a way that wasn't celebratory, I mean, I'd probably get taken out, right? So you want to think about what is the emotional state of the person. The receiver's life situation. So is there an inequality, you know, either culturally or economically
or
between
age-wise,
us?
it could be a young person.
Age-wise,
or an older person.
Yeah. Receiver's interest at the moment. Are they interested in being touched? Receiver's feelings about touch in general, and the receiver's physical state. Like, are they are they conscious? Like, if you're paying are they sleeping? You know, are they in a place? So our intentions may be great that we want to provide comfort, but we have to think about all these things that it has to go through, because we can't read the mind of the person that we want to touch. Does that make sense? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about self-care rituals that might be helpful with boundary setting with congregational care. So I encourage you to decide how much time you're willing to volunteer each week or month and stick with that. So if you say, I'm willing to give 5 hours a week to this, then, you know, that could be your boundary, and just stick with it. And even if somebody asks you to take on more, it's okay for you to say, you know, hey, I just can't this week.
Right.
Yeah. But if I've only done 3 and I check in with myself and I'm like, you know, I'm okay. I could do, you know, if Becky says, you know, I've done 2 people today, but I got the energy to do a 3rd one, then, you know, then that's you checking in with yourself. But if you're like, you know, man, I am whipped because I had all these other things come up. It's, you know, it's okay to like tap out and ask somebody else in the group, hey, you know, I just don't have it in me to go.
Right.
Could you do this for me
If you're just
today?
emotionally drained, you
Right.
can't, it's okay to say, we need to find someone else.
Right. The second thing, have boundaries around your special time with people. So, you know, we started with a prayer. Starting with a prayer, ending with a prayer might be something that you do. I encourage you to wash your hands as you're leaving a space with somebody because it kind of clears the energy in addition to being healthy. But, you know, I'll frequently go wash my hands as a way to kind of transition out of, you know, a certain situation before I go. Then I'm bringing kind of a fresh self to somebody else, and it gives me a chance to kind of have a break and regroup. And you know, you pay a visit to your doctor, what's the first thing they do? They wash their hands, and usually in front of you, so you can see them do it. Know when to say no. No is a complete sentence. So make sure you say no when you're sick or depleted. Okay. So it's okay. We all get sick. We all get depleted. Make sure that you fill your cup so you can be present with people in distress. Exercise. Make sure you're getting exercise. Social support, that you have your people who, you know, you really count on and feed you. Intellectual activities, things that are stimulating for you. Spiritual activities. So, you know, what I do, you know, I do yoga, I do massage, I aquasize 3 times a week, I come to church, I go on vacation. You will notice I did not volunteer for this ministry very intentionally because I spend 30 hours a week with people in distress.
Yeah.
So I am on the finance committee and I'm in the nursery very intentionally. Okay. So, so it's really important for you, you know, to think about, you know, your own boundaries, what, you know, what speaks to you, but also, you know, what's going to fill your cup so you can do this, because it's very difficult to sit with people who are sick and maybe even dying. You know, it takes a special kind of energy to do that. And so you want to make sure that you take care of yourself so you can do that very important work. So I'd like us to finish with just a couple kind of activities, if that would be okay.
Sure.
So this first one is what we call kind of the container exercise, and it's taken from an approach that you might be familiar with, Pastor, EMDR. So, but it's an approach where we kind of try to separate, you know, and get grounded in the present from things that we're either coming out of or things we're heading into. So what I'd have you do is just look at your hands. So I'll have you set your pens down and things. And notice that they're adult hands. And that it is 2024. And you and your adult hands are in a safe space here at church. And no one can hurt you or harm you. And I'm a safe enough person for you to be with. And what I'd like you to do is imagine that you have a personal container. And it could be any kind of container you imagine. The only thing I request is that it has a lid on it. It could be a glass jar that you could see into. It could be, you know, a trash can that is dark that has a lid that you can't see into. It could be a wicker basket. It can be whatever kind of container you'd like to think about. So I'm going to have you imagine taking the lid off of that container. And anything that's come up for you in our discussion today that maybe you want to set aside or has brought up something in you that you don't want to take with you, just put it inside that container. And imagine it's just like little Lego pieces that you can sweep off a table into your container. So maybe something we've talked about today has made you think about yourself, or your relationships or somebody that you know has gone through, or maybe an experience or encounter you've had with someone in congregational care. So just allow yourself to set it in the container and then put the lid on the container and know that that container's there, you know, anytime you need it. You can use it to set aside things. You can use it to bring things back out. But when you put the lid on the container, there's a boundary there where you can go ahead with your day since you've set those things aside. And I'm going to have you just start to pay attention to your breath, and I'm going to have you inhale to a count of 4 and hold it for 2, and then just exhale to a count of 4. And inhale to a count of 4 and hold it for 2, and then just exhale to a count of 4. And then I'd like you to just really start to place your attention to your feet and feel your feet on the floor and grounded to the earth. Notice your chair and your body against the chair. See maybe if you can feel the temperature in the room. Then start to think about maybe some things you can hear in the room. Maybe some things that you see in the room with your eyes. Maybe if you'd like to, you could take a taste of your water, kind of focus on taste. And if there's anything that particular you could smell, maybe that great chili or that great cornbread. And one more time, just inhale to a count of 4 and hold it for 2, and then just exhale to a count of 4. And inhale to a count of 4 and hold it for 2, and then just exhale to a count of 4. And know that you can use these tools anytime you need to. So you have your own container. You can carry that with you wherever you go if you need to use it. And you also can ground yourself in your 5 senses if you need to do it. So the last thing, as I bring us back together to the room, the last thing I have for us is just a little activity soothing with the 5 senses.
I think I need to take that jar with me right before you go into a visitation. You know what I mean? That's good. Thank you, Tammy, for those tools. Because definitely praying beforehand is one thing, but then not just praying, but thinking about what you need so that you can be present for that person by putting aside those things that you might be worried about in the back of your hand in your mind. Because I can't help it when I'm talking to people, I'm in my mind thinking about, you know, what other things I've got to do. So that's a good thing to do besides praying, is to put the junk in your jar.
So the last thing is, this is just a little sheet for you to kind of use to give you some ideas of things you can do if you're feeling uncomfortable. So let's say you leave a visit and you've been really impacted by it. You know, what are some things you can do to engage your 5 senses to kind of pull you out of it? So, you know, keeping some lotion, you know, in your bag and rubbing that on your hands, or maybe wearing a certain kind of clothing when you go for a visit that's comforting for you, or making sure you walk, you know, maybe if you walk around the block and get some fresh air, that can be helpful for you. Taking a shower when you get home, you know, so there's several things with touch. Listening to music, you know, selecting music. Maybe after you, you know, do a visit, you want to listen to some music to kind of change the mood. I had to take my cat to the vet yesterday, which she did not want to do, and so I put some Dua Lipa on, and we partied it up on the way to the vet, and also I didn't have to hear the yowling too much. So, you know, what kind of music would be helpful to you? Also, you know, beauty, you know, or the nature, or you know, particular words or sayings or things that kind of speak to you can be helpful. You know, maybe I had a client once who would put scripture like on his steering wheel of his car. So, you know, so maybe there's a particular scripture that speaks to you that, you know, you want to have handy that's helpful for you. Then the smell of nature, you know, candles are super popular, favorite food, you know, a smell of an activity, and then a taste, you know, maybe, you know, I think a lot of us, if we've had a bad day, we go get an ice cream or something. So, but you could think about, you know, is there I don't want to keep a peppermint in my car or something that's going to help me.
Always
Yeah.
have one in your pocket.
Yeah, yeah. So on the second page is just, you know, what are some signs that I might need to use some of these tools? So if I find myself, you know, my body tense, or if I find myself having a headache, or if I find myself teary, you know, what are some signs that might tell me, you know, it'd be helpful for me to engage with my senses? And then I encourage you on your own, since we're out of time, to just write in, you know, which choices might work for you, what speaks to you. And if those tools don't work, who in this room can you ask for help from? So who can you call and process and say, whoa, I just had a really heavy visit with someone, and can I talk to you for 5 minutes? Okay.
So is that good though, when you've had a particularly difficult time with somebody, to stop it? To stop that feeling?
If you've left them, and
Right, like I had a conversation with somebody and I was crying. I never do that. But would it have been good, instead of thinking about how that affected me, that I should have just stopped it and done one of these?
well, I think I would say it's an and. So I think it's important to feel your feelings and to probably do something to help it, you know, move.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't think about that. I just kept thinking, oh, I'm sorry, I'm so sad that that's happened. Yeah.
I've done some really interesting reading on the stress response cycle this summer, and you know, moving through whatever is stressful to you is really important. So, and a lot of that happens through physical activity or through creative activity, but being able to you know, go for a walk or call someone, do something. And crying's a helpful way to move it out of you.
Right.
But I also encourage you, you know, if you feel like, you know, it's lingering more than you're comfortable with, to call somebody in this room, you know, to get and just say and process a little bit with somebody. So.
I also like the fact that you said, can I just talk to you for 5 minutes? Because that gives you both I'm not going to go on for 3 hours.
Yeah, it's a
just
boundary.
You know, it's a boundary.
It's
right?
a boundary,
Like,
yeah.
That's all I need for you is to listen to me for 5 minutes. You know?
Yeah. Well, thank you. I went over by 5 minutes, so sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
By the way, any questions, if you don't mind?
Well, I didn't think I had any boundaries. I tend to be loose with people. I really thought I had no boundaries. So I have to thank you for starting out, showing me how many boundaries I had. Really, I had a lot. I didn't even know it.
Naturally.
Yes, I mean, that's just me, yeah. I mean, I'm not even talking about my body, although that was a great place to start, because that made sense, but just you're talking about it, I thought, I have those boundaries. I didn't even know I did.
Oh, I love the wicker basket that you gave me.
Mine was a jar with a screw-on lid. I think screw-on lids are very satisfying.
Yeah, well,
Tighten it up, nothing's going to get out with
Yeah.
that screw-on lid.
so that's why it's good you pick your container,
Yeah.
that I don't pick it for you, that
Yeah.
you pick it.
Yeah.
I like
I
that.
think the no can be a complete sentence. I don't have to quantify or qualify my no.
Oh.
I can just say no.
Right.
And then leave it, it just, that
It's
was
okay.
awesome.
Mhm.
And
You
you're
don't
not,
have to
you're
explain
not a bad
yourself, right?
person, you're not a bad person,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you say no, so, yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
Yep.
We know your time is valuable, so